Hi, this is Sepha Kirshblum. It is Sunday, May 18th at 8 p.m. And this is our 11th class of David's Diaries, King David's Diaries. And I'm just going to go back to recap what we did last week, right after the final incident of Shaul chasing David and trying to kill him. And again, David proving to Shaul that he has no intention of killing him. He would never hurt the Mashiach Hashem, and had the opportunity to kill David. I'm sorry, for David to kill Shaul, and he didn't. Right at that point, Shaul apologizes, says he realizes he's wrong, but David realizes that it's only going to be these moments of sanity. It's only going to be brief moments of clarity for Shaul, and therefore he can't hold on to that promise, and he can't bank on that promise. And he realizes he's going to have to continue hiding, but the way he's been hiding is no longer going to work because he cannot hide amongst the Jews, right? We mentioned a while back that he is literally traumatized after what happened to Nov, right? When he went to the city of Nov, and Achimelech had helped him, giving him bread, giving him the sword of Goliath. And then when Shaul found out that he had received any help and any protection from the people of Nov, he wiped out the entire city. And therefore, David would not trust himself to stay in any Jewish city, because what would be for that city in the eyes of Shaul? And he realized he couldn't hide in the Midbar anymore, right? These Zifim, the other Bedouins, the people around, were constantly going to tell Shaul where he was. And therefore, this wasn't a long-term feasible solution either. And therefore, he did what I think most of us think is unthinkable. And he went to the Plishtim. He went to our enemies to ask for safe haven, right? He said, my enemy is your enemy, which makes us allies. Please take me in. I promise my commitment to you, right? And Achish, the king of Gat, believed him, felt he was telling 100% the truth, and he could trust him, and and David would fight for Achish if a war would eventually erupt. And David convinced him by killing other cities of other Plishtim and other non-Jewish cities, claiming he killed Jews, saying, I side with you, I will always be devoted to you. Achish believes him, and he finds safe haven. And the last parak that we did last week, before we jump in now, right, as war did start, or a battle was going to start between the Plishtim and the Jews, and Achish turns to David and he's like, here's your moment to prove it to me. And David says, I'm coming, right? And he comes with him, and he promises to be Achish's personal guard and to stay with him and to be totally committed to him. But the other Sarni, Plishtim, the other main officers of Plishti army, looked at David, and they then looked at Achish and they said, is this a joke? Right? This is the man who not only killed Goliath, but there are poems and songs written about this man, about how many thousands of Plishtim he will kill. I don't care how much he's promised you. I don't care how committed he seems to be over the last 4 months with you. We are not bringing him to war, because who's to say that when we get into that war, he's not going to literally just turn on us, have inside information, be amongst us to kill us? Absolutely not. So Achish goes to David and says, this isn't me, right? I would totally trust you. I would totally keep you, but I can't do this with my other men, right? With the other Sarni Plishtim. David even pushes back until finally Achish convinces him he must leave in the morning. And now we're going to pick up where David heads back. And before we enter into Perek Lamed, I want us to appreciate the beauty of this parak from an incredibly sad perspective. It's a hard parak to read. It hurts. It's painful in many, many ways, but it's one of those few times that we get the before perspective, the during perspective, and the after perspective, that we are blessed, very, very consciously using that word, we are blessed to be able to see the hand of Hashem even in hard times, and even to see that sometimes those tragedies, or what feels like a tragedy, can sometimes be a really backhanded gift, right? So with that introduction, we're going to jump into a really hard parak. I'm in no way belittling it, a really hard parak, but a beautiful parak. ultimately to see the hands of God. So Perek Lamed in Shmuel Aleph, Pasuk Aleph, Vayihi bevo David va'anashav Tiklag biyom hashlishi va'amaleki pashtu el negev el Tiklag vayaku et Tiklag vayisrafu ota ba'esh. Right, so this is the narrator talking, and it's letting us know that David and his men have traveled back now 3 days, and letting you know the Amalekim have totally destroyed Ziklag, and they have put it up in flames. Pasuk bet, vayishpu et hanashim asher ba mikaton va'ad gadol lo hemitu ish vayinhagu ve'elchu l'darkam. Right? They came in, they took all the women, all the children. They didn't kill anyone, but they took them on their way. Vayavo David va'nashav el ha'ir v'hinei srufa ba'esh u'neshehem u'bneihem u'bnotehem nishbu. Right, David comes back to the city with his men, and all they see is just ashes. Right, the women and the children are not there; they've been taken. Pasuk Dalid, Vayisad David v'ha'am asher ito et kulam vayivku. Right, and everyone just bursts into tears. Right, this is as hard as could be imaginable. Ad asher ein bahem koach livkot, until they have nothing left. Ushtei nashei David nishbu, Achinoam ha'Yisraelit v'Abigail eshet Nabal ha'Karmeli. Right, even David's 2 wives were taken, both of them. Right, Abigail and Achinoam. Pasuk vav, vateter leDavid ma'od, ki amru ha'am l'saklo, ki ma'ran nefesh kol ha'am, ish al banav v'al benotav. Right, and this, everyone just so embittered, they're so broken, they just want to kill David. Right, skila, they want to literally stone him to death over the loss of their families. But Vayizek David Bashem Elokav, but David strengthens himself with God. Right, he is going to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how can he handle this? Pasuk Zayin, Vayomer David el Aviatar HaKohen ben Achimelech. So he turns to Aviatar and he says, Hakishan aliyah ephod, right? Bring me the ephod. I need to talk to God. Right? This is David. Something hard is happening, and I need to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayagish Aviatar et ephod el David. So Aviatar brings the ephod to David. Pasuk bet, Vayishal David Bashem lemor. And David turns to Hashem and he says, okay, Erdof acharei hagadur hazeh? Ha'asigenu? Right? Should I go? Should we try to chase these people? And if I do try to chase them, will I reach them? Right? Is there even a point to all this emotional energy, to all this physical energy, to even attempt this? Vayomer lo, and Hashem responds, Ritov, you should go chase them. Ki haseg tasig, v'hatzel tatzil. Not only will you reach them and get to them, but you will save everyone. Pasuk Tet, Vayelech David hu v'sheish me'ot ish asher ito. So David heads out with his 600 men that are with him. Vayavo'u ad Nahal Habasor. And he gets to this river, Nahal Habasor. V'hanotarim amadu, right? And so there's like a standoff of these 600 men, right? Don't forget that they're just a minute ago, it told us they're so broken, they want to kill David, right? They mamash don't have energy. So they're standing there because to cross the river is a big commitment. Pasuk Yud. Vayirdof David hu v'arba me'ot ish. He and 400 men choose to cross over the river. Vayamdu ma'tayim ish. Asher pigru me'avor et Nahal Habasor. But 200 of the men don't cross over the river. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayimtzeu ish mitzri basadeh. Right, and while they're on their way, lo and behold, they find this Egyptian man just in the field. Right, we imagine when we say in the field, he has dehydrated, he has fainted, collapsed, half dead. Right, lying in the field. Vaychu oto el David. They bring him to David. Vayitznu lo lechem. Vayochal, vayashku mayim. They give him water, they give him food, right? They're trying to revive him. Vayitnu lo pelach dveila ushnei tzumukim. Vayochal, right? Then sugary things, just trying to give him energy. Vayochal, he eats. And all of a sudden he has his spirit again, right? He is awake, he is conscious. Because 3 days have passed without him eating anything. Pasuk Gimel, Vayomer lo David. So finally, David is able to have a conversation with him. One might call it an interrogation, right? And he says, Limi ata, right? Whose are you? You're clearly a servant, right? Who do you belong to? Ve'emi zata, right? And where were you headed to? Where are you from? Where are you going? Vayomer na'ar nitri anochi. I am a nitri, but I'm an eved leish amaleki. But I am a servant to an Amaleki man. Vayazveni Adoni ki chaliti hayom shlosha. Right, but my master ditched me. Right, he threw me off to the side. I had already been sick for 3 days. Right, if he was sick for 3 days, I imagine. Right, clearly it's some level of dehydration. He was probably throwing up. He had, needed the bathroom, aka he couldn't keep up physically. Right? He needed pit stops. He needed rest breaks. He needed to lie down, right? Because he's sick. But you're just a servant and I'm your master. And if you can't keep up with us and if you're slowing us down and we have to get out of here, right? The people are eventually going to come back to the cities we raided. We can't wait for you, right? So clearly cost, I'm literally weighing the cost of you. Okay, I have to lose you. So the servant was literally thrown to die in the field. Pasuk Yudalid, Anachnu pashatnu negev hakreti va'ad asher liYehuda va'al negev kalev ve'et Siklag sarafnu ba'esh. And then he finds out from the servant, right? David learns a lot of information. Siklag was not the only city that was targeted by this group, right? By these bandits, but it were many cities, including Jewish cities, that had been taken and all the women and children taken. Pasuk Tetvav, Vayomer Elav David, right? So David now, he learns all this information. He says to him, Hatorideni etagadurazeh? Like, do you know where they are? Right? Could you lead me to this group? Vayomer, right? And very smartly responds, Hishavali be'elokim, im timiteni, be'im tiskareni bi'adodoni. I could, right? But I'm going to demand something in return, right? First, I need you to swear to me in the name of your God, right? That number one, you won't kill me yourself. And number two, you won't give me back to my master, right? After I give you all this information, after I help you, right? I need safe haven. But if you do promise me those things, I know exactly where they are and I will bring them to you. So what happens, right? He agrees. Right? And these men are just partying, right? They are taking all this food and all this alcohol and all these things that they have stolen from all of the cities, and they are partying with it, right? From the Plishti cities, from the Jewish cities, Pasuk Zayin, Vayakim David mehaneshef va'ad ha'arev lemacharatam. V'lo nimlat mehem ish ki im 400 ish na'ar asher rakvu al hagmalim vayanusu. Right? David and his men take them down. They fight the entire night and the entire next day. They don't let anyone who stayed to live. Just some escaped on camels. Right? Pasuk Yud Chet, Vayatzel David et kol asher laku Amalek. And David saves everything that the Amalekim had taken. V'et shtei nashav hitzil David, including his 2 wives. V'lo ne'adar lahem min hakaton va'ad hagadol va'ad habanim ubanot umishalal va'al ad kol asher laku lahem hakol hishiv David. Right? David gets everything back. The women, the children, the money, everything David is able to recollect. Pasuk Chaf, Vayikach David et kol hatzon v'habakar nahagu L'fnei hamikneh hahu vayomru zeh shalal David. Right, he collects all of it and he takes ownership of it all. Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Vayavo David el matayim ha'anashim asher pigru milachat acharei David vayoshivu menachal habasor. Right, so now he's taking everybody back. They get back to that same river, and lo and behold, they bump into their 200 other men Vayetzu lekrat David ulekrat Amasherito, and understandably, those 200 men are so excited to see them, they rush to greet them. Vayigash David ta'am, vayish'al lahem shalom. Right, everybody's checking on everybody else. Pasuk Bet vaya'an kol ish Ra uBelial, but all of David's men who were not nice people, mehanashem asher halchu im David, of the 400 men who went with David. Vayomru, and they say, Hanasher lo halchu imi, lo nitin lahem me'ashalal asher hitzalnu. I'm sorry, you didn't join us in this war. You don't get to reap the benefits of the war, right? You don't get to come with. Absolutely not. Ki im ish ve'et ishto ve'et banav v'inhagu ve'elchu. Right? We'll let you have your wives and children back, right? Okay, fine. We're nice, right? But we're not letting you take anything else. There's no wealth you're gaining from this. You didn't fight with us. Pasuk Chav Gimel, Vayomer David lo ta'asu kenachai. Right? David turns to his 400 men and he says, absolutely not, my brothers. Right? Et asher natan Hashem lanu. We didn't earn this. You didn't earn this. You didn't get these things back. God did that. Vayishmor otanu, he protected us. Vayitena tagadur haba aleinu, he gave them into our hands. Therefore, Pasuk Kaf Daled, Umi shma lachem ledavar hazeh, ki kechelek hayored b'milchama, ukechelek hayoshev al hakelim, yachdav yachaloku. Right? And David says, this is not how it's going to work amongst us. Right? The way it's going to work is if someone goes to war and someone stays home, we are mechalek, we divide amongst everybody, right? Because one of the things they learned from this situation is you can't send everyone off to war. You can't leave a city behind unattended and unprotected, right? So you don't want it to be that people don't want to stay home because they won't earn from the war. You want people to want to stay home so that that area is protected. Pasuk Kafhei vayihi mehayom hahu v'mala vayisimeha l'chok u'lemishpat liYisrael. Ad Hayom Hazeh. And this rule that David makes is now a rule that stays forever amongst the Jewish people, that whether you go to fight the war or you stay home, you get a piece of the war, or of the spoils. Sorry. Pasuk Afav, Vayavo David el Tiklag, Vayshalach me'ashalal, Ziknei Yehuda l're'ehu lemor, Hinei lachem. Right? And now David is going to literally take all the spoils and send them back to the Jewish cities. We're going to get to that. You know what? We'll finish the parak and then we'll go back, right? So he literally sends, Hinei lachem bracha mishal oivei Hashem, right? These are the spoils of war from the enemies of God, and he sends it to Beit El, to Ramot Negev, to Bayatir, la'arorer, Sifmot, la'asher be'eshta moa, to Barakal, to Ba'arei HaYerachmi Eli, to Ba'arei HaKeni, Becharma, B'Vsor Ashan. Right, hold on, next page. To Batach, to Hebron, and to all Mekomot Asher Hitalech Sham David Uva Anashav. Right, he sends it back to all these cities who had been affected by this bandit group. But why is this parak so significant, right? It didn't have to tell us this, number one, right? And number two, what a tragic story, right? They were going to fight, they got sent home, and when they get sent home, they see everyone's gone. And I don't even need to know the story because it, quote, quote, ends happy. So why do I need to know that this happened, right? Just tell me that it all ended well, right? Part of this is to remind us what would have happened if this didn't happen and David had stayed in Ziklag or had just returned to Ziklag, and then he would find out about this war that we're about to learn about in Perek Lamed Aleph, right? If David got wind of how bad this war is going to get for the Jewish people, right? Those of us who know David on whatever level we know David, there's no way he would have stayed in Ziklag. The minute he heard about what was happening to Shaul, to Yonatan, to the Jewish people, he would have rushed to help them. But not only would that have been terrible, right? Not only would that have lost any credibility he has with the Plishtim, he probably would have lost, and he might not have survived himself. right? So what God was doing was, yes, it seems like a tragedy, but he was mamash keeping David busy, so emotionally invested elsewhere that he would never know what was going on in the Jewish war, so that he could never get involved in the Jewish war, right? This was a backhanded gift to David to keep him completely occupied during the days that would have been too hard for him to either not know what was going on, or had he found out what was going on, to get involved in a very dangerous way. And therefore it seems harsh, but it's mamash to his benefit, right? And then the parak ends taking it even to another level, because as we're going to see, and I don't think this is a spoiler alert because we saw last week what Shmuel had warned Shaul about, right? Shaul is going to die in this war. And therefore, David is just trying to make peace with certain areas of the Jewish people by sending these gifts back. He's acknowledging, I'm not against you, right? I was never against you. I'm not intending to be against you. I love you. I feel part of your people. Don't believe everything that Shaul has been preaching for the last many months, right? It was just fabricated information. I'm not a rebel. I'm not trying to hurt the Jewish people. I genuinely love you and will send all the gifts back because that's who I am, right? So it has this dual message of, one, keeping him busy, but number two, giving him an opportunity to give back to the Jews, right? So that's how Perek Lamed ends. But we're going to now jump into Perek Lamed Aleph to ping pong back to the war, to see it from the perspective of Shaul, right? So our final parak in Shmuel Aleph, right? Don't forget that Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet is a Christian divide. To us, it's just Shmuel, right? When we talk about the 24 books of Tanakh, the Chaftalid Sifrei Tanakh, Shmuel is one book. It's not Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet. It's one book. So for us, yes, we will be finishing Shmuel Aleph right now, but we're just going to continue straight into Shmuel Bet because it's mamash one sefer from our divide. So Perek Lamed Aleph, Pasuk Aleph, Plishtim nilchamim b'Yisrael, right? The Plishtim are fighting and fighting hard against the Jews. Vayanusu anshe Yisrael mipnei Plishtim, and the Jewish people are literally running from before the Plishtim. Vayiplu chalalim bahar Gilboa, right? Because so many are falling in battle at Har Gilboa, right? This mountain, Har Gilboa, where the major battle is taking place. We are losing so many. Pasuk Bet, Vayadbku Plishtim et Shaul ve'et banav, right? The Plishtim literally have their eye on the prize, right? Like Devek, right? They are like glue. They are focused solely on getting Shaul and his sons. Vayaku Plishtim et Yonatan ve'et Avinadav ve'et Malkishua b'nei Shaul. And on Har Gilboa, they are successful, and they're able to kill the three sons of Shaul in this battle: Yonatan, Avinadav, and Malkishua. Pasuk Gimel, Bad HaMilchama El Shaul. The war is heavy, right? It is hard and it is heavy for Shaul. Vayimtza'u hamorim anashim bakashet. Vayachel me'od mehamorim, right? They are just shooting arrows and just taking down so many Jews, right? We're going to hear even in more detail in Shmuel Bet, right? But here the Pshat is just letting us know how bad it is. Pasuk Daled, Vayomer Shaul Nosei Kelev. And at this point, Shaul turns to his Nosei Kelev is the guy who carries his stuff, right? But it's kind of like his right-hand man, right? Not in terms of a warrior, but like his servant that's following him around, right? He turns to him and he says, Shlof charbacha v'takreni ba, please take your sword, please kill me. Right? If you let the Plishtim come and get me, right? It's imminent. They're right here. They're coming. If you let them kill me, they're not just going to kill me, right? These horrible, disgusting people, they will torture me, right? They will mock me. They will mock my body. They will literally take even the corpse to mock. V'lo avano sekelav ki arei ma'od, but his servant refused, right? He couldn't do it. He was too scared, right? I can't do it. I can't do it. Until vayikach Shaul et hacherev vayipol aleha. Until Shaul takes his own sword and literally falls on top of his sword to kill himself. Pasuk Hey, vayarno sekelav ki met Shaul. And when his servant sees, oh my gosh, Shaul just killed himself. Vayipol gam hu al charbo. He is so scared, right? Clearly the fear of Shaul was so intense. It's like, oh my gosh, I should be that scared, right? What would they do to me? So he then falls on his own sword, Vayamatimo, and he kills himself as well. Pasuk Vav, Vayamat Shaul, Ushlosha Banav, V'nosei Kelav, Gam Kol Anashav, Vayom Hahu, Yaftav. Right, and on that day, Shaul, his 3 sons, his weapon bearer, and all of his men die together on Har Gilboa. Pasuk Zayin, Vayir'u Anshe Yisrael Asher Be'ever Ha'emek V'Asher Be'ever HaYarden. Right, this is not on Har Gilboa. Word is spreading so quickly amongst the Jews. Kinasu Anshe Yisrael, right, because men from the war are literally running for their lives. And they hear, Kimetu Shaul Banav, right? And what's the first rumor to go round, right? And a legit rumor, but nevertheless, all hearsay, right? Shaul and his sons are dead. Vayazvu et ha'arim. They abandon their own cities. They are so scared that the war is going to keep progressing that they literally run to escape their cities. Vayanusu, vayavo Plishtim, vayeshu bahem. Right? They abandon their cities, and understandably, right, as it should be in war, so to speak, the Plishtim overtake the abandoned cities. Right? This is probably one of the worst wars described, definitely in the Nevi'im Rishonim, right? Definitely from pre-Korban, of just total destruction from the Jewish people. Pasuk Chet, Vayihime macharat, vayavo Plishtim, l'fashet et hachalalim. Right? So this was one day of the battle, and the next day the Plishtim come to literally raid the spoils of war. Because back in the day, right, the wealthier you were and the more significant you were in the army, the more gold and silver and jewelry and beautiful things adorned your shield. And right, you had a crown, and they used to have beautiful arm jewelry that they wore, right? It showed the royalty, it showed the significance, right? So they know that really important people died on this mountain. So they go to check out the spoils of war they can take. And when they're there, Vayimtzu et Shaul ve'et Shloshet Banav. And while they're on Har Gilboa reading through everything, they identify Shaul and his 3 sons, Noflim Har Gilboa, right, who had all died there. Pasuk Tet, Vayichretu et Rosho. They cut off Shaul's head, Vayafshitu et Kelav. They get all of his armor. וישלחו בארץ פלישתים סביב לבשר בית עצביהם ואת העם. And they come back to the Plishti cities parading all of these things, right? All of Shaul's fears were true, right? They're literally parading his stuff and his body and his head all over to show what they have won. Pasuk Yud, Vayasimu et Kilav Beit Ashtarot. They take all of his shields and all the stuff that was super significant and very heavy and gold and rich things, right? They put it in their treasure house. Et Gviato Taku Bechomat Beit Shan. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to translate it, and it is intense, right? They take his head and they put it on a pike of the wall, right? So like all of the gates have those pikes and those, straight, I have no better word for it than that. Looks like a spear. They put his head on the wall for the world to see their conquest and what they were able to do, right? And sadly, I think we can all understand and believe this in today's times. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayishma'u elav yoshvei Yabesh Gilad. It's Asher Asu Plishtim, Shaul, right? And obviously they did this for word to get around and word gets around until it gets to the area of the people of Yavesh Gilad. The people of Yavesh Gilad are not Jews, but they lived in Israel and they followed Shaul as the king, right? They would pay him taxes for him to take care of them, etc. Right? They hear what happened to Shaul. Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayakumu Kol Ish Chayil. That night, all of the people from Yabesh Gilad, all the Anshe Chayil, right? Anyone who felt they were strong enough, Vayelchu Kol Halayla, Vayikhu Et Gviat Shaul, Ve'et Gviot Banav, Mechumat Beit Sha'an. They go, and in this mission, in the middle of the night, they go to reclaim the bodies of Shaul and his sons from the wall. Vayavo Yavesha, they come back to Yavesh Gilad. Vayisrifu otam sham, they burn just the heads of Shaul and the sons, but this isn't a sign of disrespect. This is actually a sign of respect, meaning the heads are identifiable, right? And therefore they knew if they kept them, or even if they buried them, then the Plishtim would come, re-attack them, to dig up the graves, to be able to redo exactly what they did, right? So they decide the only way to protect the integrity, so to speak, of Shaul and his sons is to burn the heads so that they're cremated and there wouldn't be any identification left available. And then Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayikhu et atzmotehem, vayikbru tachat ha'eshel b'yavesha. But the bodies that are not so identifiable, they bury and they give the bodies a proper burial in Yabesh Gilad, Vayatsumu Shivat Yamim, and they fast for 7 days in a version of their Shiva, meaning what the Pshat is highlighting here is the respect that the people of Yabesh Gilad are giving to Shaul and his men, in contrast to the disrespect and the cruelty that was showed by the Plishtim to Shaul and his sons. Right, so we end Shmuel Aleph, but we're just going to jump right in and continue into Shmuel Bet. So Shmuel Bet, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Aleph, Vayihi Acharei Mot Shaul. Oh, sorry.
Can I just ask a question?
Please.
Either I'm missing or I forgot. What did Am Yisrael do that they deserved such a horrible result of this war? What did they do? Am I
So what's
missing
interesting,
something or I
because
forgot?
no, meaning what you're quote quote missing, Sarah, is not anything that was ever in the text. Meaning the Pshat was so focused on engaging you in the story of Shaul and David, it didn't engage you in the nation in any way, right? We're coming off of Sefer Shoftim, where we just focused on the people, right? Yes, you heard about leaders, but you really just heard about the sins and mistakes of the people. So this war comes to us as if it's the punishment for Shaul, right? That's how we jumped into it. But the text just didn't describe what was going on in the Jewish people. Clearly, it was not a good time in terms of our devotion to God, etc. It doesn't frame this war as a punishment, even though I think you and I and most readers look at this and say, how could this not be, right? This is tragic on so many levels. It's heart-wrenching. We lose cities, we lose territory, we lose countless of soldiers, right? It doesn't even go into detail of that, but as we'll see in this parak, it will give a little bit more of inkling into that. But I think it is highlighting that we were not amazing at this time, clearly, right? And even though God is not highlighting the Sefer to highlight the Jewish people, we're getting much more a Sefer about leadership. It most definitely, trickles down that the mistakes of Shaul are not just his mistakes, they often do reflect the concept of the leadership, right? I think so much, coming off of Parshat Emor, of the representation of a Kohen Gadol, right? I think often of that concept. I think it's the Gemara that says that when someone was I'm trying to think, it's not a rodef, but someone who killed and has to run to an Ir Miklat because they killed the Shogeg, right? So they run to the Ir Miklat, and they're there until the Kohen Gadol of the generation dies, right? And then it's mentioned that in the Gemara that the mother of the Kohen Gadol would go and bring them gifts, she would bring them food and bake, etc., in hopes, or even maybe to articulate clearly, please don't daven for my son to die so that you get freedom, right? And it's such a weird concept, right? What do you mean that someone could daven for the Kohen Gadol to die and God would listen to that? There's so many elements of that that's strange, but it's highlighting the Kohen Gadol represents the spiritual level of the generation. And if something like that can happen, even a mistake, an accident, so to speak, that means that the top Kohen Gadol either wasn't davening hard enough for his people to have a spiritual awakening, or he wasn't keeping them in check. And I think what we're introduced to in Shaul, but through the generations of kings, of wherever the king is holding, that's usually indicative of where the people are holding. And if Shaul is so not focused on his avodas Hashem or his leadership of the people, but he's so solely focused on getting rid of David and taking his troops all over the country just to take this man who he believes is conspiring against him, right? This is indicative that this is the feeling of the Jewish people of the time, right? That spiritually we're all over the place in different directions. And therefore, I don't want to say they deserved it, because I am not one to say anyone deserves anything. I think that's just for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But clearly, I think you're picking up on the fact, Sarah, that clearly this time was not a time of greatness of the Jewish people, because this war was too great a punishment for it to not feel as a punishment. So I'm sorry, that was a very long-winded, not great answer, but I think you're 100% right that the text is just not telling us that, but it clearly is that. So I hope that was on some level an answer.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Vayhi acharei mot Shaul, right? And after Shaul died, the David shav mehakot et Hamalek, right? And David's now back in Siklag after his whole debacle with that group from Amalek. Vayeshev David b'Siklag yamim shnayim. Right, so he's now back in Siklag for 2 days, and I imagine he is waiting on shpilkas. Right, what is going on? What's happening? No one's come back. He doesn't know yet what is happening until pasuk bet vayihi b'yom hashlishi, on the 3rd day that he's there. Hine ish ba min hamachaneh me'im Shaul. Right, all of a sudden, someone does show up, right, from Shaul's camp. Uvgadav kruim, and his clothes are torn, right, clearly indicating he's in mourning, and then validated va'adama al rosho, right, he has dirt on his head. Vayihi bevo'o el David, vayipol arta vayishtachavu. He shows up in front of David, and then as soon as he sees David, he falls on the ground and bows to him. Pasuk Gimel, Vayomer lo David, and David sees him and he says, "Oh my gosh, Amy Zetavo, right? Where are you coming from? Right? I need information. Where? Tell me, right? Where are you coming from?" Vayomer Elav, and he says to him, "Mimachana Yisrael nimlatati. I escaped from the Jewish army camp." Right? Pasuk Dalet, Vayomer Elav David. Oh my gosh, right? Mehaya hadavar. What is going on? Hagednali, please tell me what's happening. Vayomer, so he says, Asher Nasa'am Milchama, right? So he's going to start global and then zero in, right? But he's already giving him so much information, right? The nation has run away from this war. V'gam harbe nafal min ha'am vayamutu gam Shaul v'Yonatan beno metu. Right? He says, a lot of people fell, but not just a lot of people, right? Shaul was killed and Yonatan was killed, right? And we go from the nation ran to many people in the army died to Shaul, and then what he knows would hurt the most for him is Yonatan. So David turns to this person who says it to him and he says, Eich yadata kimut Shaul v'Yonatan bano. Right? How do you know? Right? I don't need hearsay. I don't need someone telling you and you think and you heard. Right? No, I don't want to believe that. Right? Pasuk vav vayomer hanar hamagidlo. But this boy continues and he says to him, well, it's not hearsay. Nikro Nikreti Bahar HaGilboa, right? I happen to have been on Har Gilboa. V'hinei Shaul Nish'an al Chanito, right? And I saw that Shaul was literally lying on top of his sword. V'hinei Harechev Uba'alei HaPrashim Hidbikuhu, right? In that moment that I saw him, I could hear the chariots of the Plishtim getting closer, right? They were so focused on Shaul, they were right behind. Pasuk Zayin, Vayifen Acharav, Hireni. And all of a sudden, Shaul turns around and he saw me. Vayikrai, and he called to me, Vaomar, Hineni, right? And oh my gosh, here I am. What do you need? Pasuk Chad, Vayomer li, and then Shaul said to me, Mi ata, right? Who are you? Vaomar love. So I said to him, Amaleki Anochi, I'm an Amaleki. Pasuk Tet, Vayomer Elai, and then he said to me, Amadna alai umotateni, right? I need you to finish the job, right? I need you to stand on me, right? Finish the job I started and kill me. Ki achazani hashavet, ki kol od nafshi bi, right? I'm still alive, right? But I'm not going to make it. So I need your help. Pasuk Yud, va'amod alav, va'amotatehu. So I did. I stood on him and I killed him. Because I saw he wouldn't make it. There was nothing I could do to save him at that point. And then ve'ikach et hanezer asher al rosho, and then I took his crown from his head, ve'etzada al zro'o, and I took that arm piece that was on his hand, right? That was most definitely like a identification piece of Shaul. Va'avi'im el Adoni hena, and I brought them here to you, right? Dovid, my master, I brought them to you. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayachazik David Bavgadav, Vayikraim, right? David takes his clothes in that moment and tears them, meaning once he sees this proof, once he sees the crown and the arm piece, right? He believes this na'ar, right? So he tears his clothes in mourning. V'gam kol ha'anashim asher ito, including all the men that were with him, right? And this pasuk is so crucial because don't forget why these 600 men are with David, right? It's not just that they believed in David, right? It was that they were mar nefesh. They were bitter because they hated Shaul, right? That's where all these random guys came from, right? They had issues with Shaul, they had fights with Shaul, they owed Shaul, they hated him, whatever it might have been. But when push comes to shove and you hear that your nation just took such a major blow and that your king, the first king of the Jewish people, was killed in battle, all of that animosity and frustration and anger, it just melts. And they're all mourning the loss of Shaul. Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayispedu, they all eulogize him. Vayivku, and they all cry. Vayatsumu ad ha'arev, and they fast the rest of the day. Al Shaul, va'al Yonatan bno, va'al Am Hashem, va'al Beit Yisrael, ki naflu b'charev. Right? They are mourning this entire scene. They're mourning over Shaul. They're mourning over Yonatan, over the concept of this is the Am Hashem, what has happened, right? And for the Jewish people as a whole, because of the loss we just took. Pasuk Yud Gimel, and it's almost like David was in a fog from the information, and now he is slightly unfogged, right? Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayomer David El Hanar Hamagidlo. All of a sudden, he turns back to this person who brought him the news, and he says, "Wait a minute, Amy Zata, tell me again who you are." Vayomer, and he says, Ben Ish Ger Amaleki Anochi. I am the son of a Amaleki convert. Pasuk Yud Daled. Vayomer, I love David. So David says, oh, so wait, you think you're part of the Jewish people? Ech lo yareta l'shloach yadcha l'shachet et Mashiach Hashem. Who do you think you are, right? How could you not have been scared to kill the Mashiach Hashem, right? I'm now hearing you again, right? I'm now hearing everything you said to me before, and I just processed it. And I don't understand how you could have done such a thing, right? But don't forget that the Snar is coming to David thinking he did him a favor, right? Thinking he did this as like a show of support to David, right? But does David ever want anyone to think that this is what he would consider support? No. Pasuk Ted Vav Vayikra David Achad Mehanarim, right? He calls one of his servants over, Vayomer, and he says, Gash Pegabo, kill him. Vayakehu Vayamot. Right? This boy, this bearer of bad news, literally, needs to be killed. So the servant kills him. Vayomer Elav David, and as it's happening, David says, Damcha al Roshecha, right? I'm not taking responsibility for your death, right? Your blood is on your own head. Ki picha anabecha more, because your mouth had the audacity to say, Anochi motati et Mashiach Hashem. I killed the Mashiach Hashem. Right now, it does seem extreme, at least for me. This seems extreme, right? But don't forget the message he is sending the world. I am not happy about what happened to Shaul. And not only am I not happy, those who think that this is supporting my cause, or those who think that I am in any way connected or would be any way positive about this, understands that the person who says to me, I killed him, I'm going to kill him. Right? So don't you dare think that I would want this for Shaul or Shaul's house. And then he goes on to eulogize him, to lament, right? Pasuk Zayin ve'ikonin David et hakina hazot al Shaul ve'al Yonatan beno. And then David writes a lamentation, right? A kinah for Shaul and Yonatan, right? And some of the lines are very famous. Pasuk Et vayomer, he says, Lelamed b'nei Yehuda kashet, hine ketuvah al sefer hayashar. Right? If someone wanted to learn how to shoot a bow and arrow, right? Who was the person you went to? Where was it written? By Yonatan, right? Who was the greatest archer? I don't understand. Pasuk Yoter Hatzvi Yisrael, Abba Motecha Halal. Right? Who is the lightest on their feet? Right? These are the descriptions of Shaul. I don't understand. Eich naflu giborim. How have these mighty fallen? Right? How could this have happened? I don't want the people in Gat, aka the Plishtim city, to talk about this. Ashkelon, right? Ashkelon was also a Plishtim city, right? I don't want this discussed in Ashkelon. Pen tismachna benot Plishtim, right? Don't forget when he killed Goliath, right? The women came out singing. Oh, I don't know how that happened. Singing and dancing. Right, and making up the songs that Shaul kills thousands, but David kills tens of thousands. So he says, no, I don't want the word to spread in the Plishti cities because I don't want songs to be written by them that they're going to parade around. Pent alozna benot arelim, right? I don't need this to come out of the mouths of the women of the Plishtim. Ugh, right? Pasuk Vav Aleph Harei b'Gilboa al tal v'al matar alechem ustei trumot, right? Har Gilboa should never have rain on it again. I don't want anything to grow beautiful there. I don't want anything to grow there, period. Right? How tragic a place. I want it to always be seen as a tragic place. Kisham nigal magin giborim. Right? Oh my gosh, because this is where the shields of the strong ones were taken. Magin Shaul. Believe Mashiach Bashemen, right? The same shield that oil was poured over because he's the Mashiach Hashem is the same shield that couldn't protect him. I don't understand. Pasuk Avbet midam chalalim mechelev giborim. Right? What? How is there blood spilled here? Right? Keshet Yonatan lo nasog achor. Yonatan's bow never came back empty-handed. B'cherev Shaul lo tashuv rekam. And Shaul's sword never came back empty-handed, meaning they were always the ones who were successful. They always killed others. They were never able to be killed. Pasuk Chaf Gimel, Shaul v'Yonatan. Hane'ahavim v'hane'imim b'chayehem. Right, Shaul and Yonatan, you had the most beautiful relationship of love and pleasantness between you in your lives. Uvemotam lo nifradu. Right, so how appropriate that in your death you weren't separated. Min sharim kalu ume'arot gaveru. Right, you were as light as eagles, as fast and strong as lions. I don't understand how you were taken down. Pasuk Vavdalid, Benot Yisrael al Shaul b'chana. Right, the women of the Jewish people, you should be sitting and crying over Shaul. Right, all what used to be parades of song will now be just tears. Hamal bishim shani im adanim hamale adi zahav. Right? He's the one that adorns you in beautiful clothes with gold and rich materials because he was so successful in war, and now you have nothing. Pasuk Hey, again, Eich naflu kiborim. How have these mighty fallen? B'tocha milchama Yehonatan. Alba motecha halal. Right? You were always the one that was able to get everyone else. How could someone have reached you? Pasuk Vav, tsar li alecha. Right? When I think of you, Yonatan, it's the most painful. Achi, Yonatan, you were like a brother to me. Na'amta li ma'od, you were so good to me. Niflata ahavatcha li me'avat nashim. Right? The love you gave me was more wonderful in the literal definition of the word than any romantic love I've ever experienced, right? It was everything we had spoken about a long time ago of unconditional love, right? You were just so devoted to me without any wants or needs. And finally, Pasuk of Zion, Ich naflu giborim. How have these mighty fallen? Vayovdu klei milchama. We have completely lost. Whatever tools of war the Jewish people had are now gone, right? And what he's highlighting here is what the text doesn't often highlight is the talent that Shaul and Yonatan had in terms of strategy, in terms of strength, in terms of war. These were incredible warriors. And he's just saying, I can't wrap my head around the fact that someone could kill you, right? I can't wrap my head around the fact that you could quote, quote, lose, right? But you feel his pain, his shock, he's beyond words at this point, right? This is his lamentation, but I imagine he's just in this deep, heavy sadness, which will take him a few days to come out of, right? Because he won't have a choice, right? I think if he had a choice of time, he would have stayed there longer, right? But he's just not able to even process the gravity of everything that happened, right? And I think most of us, we hear this and we feel his pain, but we're almost waiting for the next parak to be like, so now just take the throne, right? Now you're not on the run anymore. Now everything's going to be okay. But as we're going to see, it's not going to be okay, right? As we're going to see, it's not going to be that the world, especially the Jewish people, will run and embrace him. Very far from it, sadly. So we're going to have to wait next week. I apologize. I will not be teaching next Sunday night on Yom Yerushalayim. I'm not able to be here. So I will email when the next time is, because I don't know why. I feel like the following Sunday night is actually Shavuot. Is that possible? I think so. Someone can tell me on the calendar. I can look after and just email everyone. But I think we actually have a larger break. I think we have a 2-week break now. That next Sunday I'm not able to be here, and then I think the Sunday after is Shavuot. So we will please God pick up again after Shavuot.
The Sunday after is Shavuot. The Sunday night.
It is, right? Okay, that's what I thought. I'm like, I know I fell out of the Omer count last Shabbos, but I'm pretty confident on that. So then I'll be emailing you when our next class is, which I think will be in 3 Sundays. But have a Chag Sameach if I don't see you both, and a Shavuot Tov.
Thank you.